Hello, welcome to Culture Hash. Today we're going to review the debut studio album from Northwest London rapper Fredo. The album is called Third Avenue, named after a busy street in Kilburn, Northwest London, where Fredo is from. Fredo is one of the rising stars in the UK hip-hop scene and already has a #1 single under his belt. His rapid rise within music is even more impressive considering that Fredo didn't really start taking rap seriously until about 2016. From his perspective, he only entered the hip-hop scene to expose some MCs that he saw as living fake lives and inject some authenticity back within the genre. So far, Fredo's biggest hit is the Dave-assisted track Funky Friday. This was released in October 2018 and peaked at #1 in the UK singles chart. Within UK hip-hop, Dave is already firmly established, and this #1 single really added to his growing sense of credibility. Considering that some of the biggest UK rap artists like Stormzy and Giggs don't have a #1 single, for Fredo to do this is very impressive considering how young his career is. Especially as Funky Friday was unapologetic British hip-hop, this track didn't really cater to the pop charts with flashy production or a trendy hook. Produced by Dave with assistance from Fraser T. Smith, Funky Friday just saw the two MCs trade bars over a grime-inspired British hip-hop track. The success of Funky Friday launched Fredo's career in earnest and built great anticipation for his debut album. Funky Friday went gold in the UK and is the biggest single for either Dave or Fredo. In 2018, Fredo was also featured on I Carumba with Young T and Bugsy. I Carumba was sunny and fun Afrobeat. I Carumba was quite bouncy and fun and spent 16 weeks in the UK singles chart, peaking at #32. While this track didn't achieve the runaway success of Funky Friday, it showed a more fun, carefree side to Fredo and further solidified his place within British hip-hop. It's notable that the two biggest singles of Fredo's young career do not appear on his debut album. This is a good move for him because these vibey, more fun party tracks don't really fit into the dark, somber mood of Third Avenue. It would have been simple for Fredo to fill Third Avenue with tracks that have already come out, but I respect the fact that he left these tracks off his debut album in order to benefit the mood and create a more coherent sound space. Third Avenue is the debut album from Fredo and comes after he released two successful mixtapes, 2017's Get Rich or Get Recalled and 2018's Tables Turn. Third Avenue is considerably better than Tables Turn, and Fredo demonstrates his growth as an artist. Tables Turn was alright, it had some decent moments. It was a bit one-dimensional, mainly featuring grimy coke rap tracks. There's the obligatory pop rap crossover attempt, which features Notes. Notes has sort of been typecast in this role of singing hooks and attempting to cross over, so it wasn't a great surprise to see him featured on Tables Turn. Third Avenue shows a growing artistic maturity from Fredo. On Third Avenue, Fredo builds upon the foundations he laid on Tables Turn. Third Avenue is based on Fredo's trademark style of reality-based, brutal street narratives, told with unflinching honesty and great detail from Fredo. His flow and storytelling abilities are certainly influenced by Giggs, and Fredo's raps are mid-tempo, low register, to really add gravitas to these street narratives, and he couples these with some minute details to really just bring out this style and add density and texture to these tales that he tells throughout Third Avenue. But his style is gripping due to the personality and charisma that he shows throughout the project, and leaves no doubt in the listener that a lot of these stories are grounded in reality, and Fredo has been through some really difficult times during his younger days. Third Avenue features 13 tracks, runs to about 40 minutes in length. It's quite a tight listen, there aren't really any songs that are wasted here, and Fredo shows his new artistic maturity by addressing a range of subjects over these 13 tracks. While Tables Turn sort of got bogged down in a lot of the coke raps, Third Avenue has a lot more variety in terms of the subject matter on here. He's even got the classic song about his mum towards the end, and there are some nice moments of introspection from Fredo, and we get to learn a little bit more about his character than we've heard from him previously. While Fredo still talks a lot about beating people up and selling coke, his rhymes feel a lot more nuanced on this project, and we get a better sense of maturity from Fredo and understanding him better as a person. As such, the best tracks on this album are the introspective cuts, like Survival of the Fittest, Love You For That, and the closer, Third Avenue. Survival of the Fittest delves into Fredo's past, the area he grew up, why he still hangs around in these deprived areas despite having the money to leave, his sense of loyalty to his old friends. Survival of the Fittest fulfills that nice introductory track you hear on most rap albums. We get to learn about where Fredo's from, where he's come from, his perspective on his life at the moment, and it gives the listener a nice understanding of what this project's about and where Fredo is in his life. Love You For That fulfills that classic rap staple of a track about the rapper's mum. Some people feel like this subject's been done to death in rap, but I personally love it, and Love You For That is a great example of a tribute to Fredo's mum. Fredo's like a roadman basically, so as you'd expect, he must have put his mum through a great deal of grief when he was getting sent to prison, dealing loads of coke, getting into fights. And Fredo shows great awareness of the psychological impacts that his misspent youth might have had on his mother. He talks about the effect of him missing his GCSEs had on her, and her growing acceptance that her son was just deep into this life of drug dealing. And I like when he talks about how his actions also impacted his younger brother as well. Fredo shows great maturity and emotional depth on this track, and Love You For That is one of the strongest tracks on this album. Love You For That is the most tender and emotional track on this album, but Fredo doesn't really deviate from his style that we've heard throughout. This is a positive because I really like Fredo's low-key, deep voice delivery throughout this album. And these emotional tracks are the sort of areas where you'd be worried that Fredo might try and do some singing or put some auto-tune on his voice. But Fredo sticks to his style and it really benefits the track and makes it feel authentic to him. Love You For That is the penultimate track on the album, and the closer is Third Avenue. These two tracks sort of dovetail together and work really nicely back to back in the track listing. Love You For That examines the emotional toll that Fredo's criminal past had on his mother, while Third Avenue details this criminal past in greater detail from Fredo's perspective. These tracks work brilliantly placed next to each other in the track listing and give two sides of the same story to the listener to close out the album. Putting these two tracks next to each other shows great care and dedication from Fredo in sequencing this project in a clever way. On the track Third Avenue, Fredo talks about his youth. Fredo gives vivid first-person narrative accounts of a violent youth, getting into trouble with the police, going to prison, over a really nice, mellow, grime-inspired beat. And it works so well with the track before because you can imagine what his mother was thinking when he's describing the actions that he was taking in his late teenage years. These two tracks close the album out nicely and really show this emotionally mature side to Fredo, something you don't hear across the album, if I'm honest. We've got Doing the Most featuring Little Dots, one of two guest features on Third Avenue. Little Dots is Fredo's protege, and he does a decent verse on here. Doing the Most is just like a boasting track, basically, talking about like smoking, buying stuff. As a duo, Fredo and Little Dots don't work as well as Fredo and Dave do. They don't really have that connection, and Little Dots is nowhere near as good of a rapper as Dave is. Again, It's Like is another criminal track where Fredo talks about his past and what he's doing on the streets and that sort of thing. There are several of these tracks that explore the coke rap side of Fredo, and for the most part they're enjoyable, but they lack the emotional depth of tracks like Third Avenue and Survival of the Fittest. And it's this emotion and introspection that makes these tracks more compelling than the straight narratives of just selling coke and buying stuff from the money you get off it. All I Ever Wanted featuring Dave is a very enjoyable track on here. Like Funky Friday, we hear Dave and Fredo go back and forth. Dave's got a really good line about an aubergine and an eggplant that needs to be heard to be appreciated. And Fredo's verse is a bit more stoic and laid back than Dave's. In terms of technical rapping and wordplay, Dave is superior on this track, whereas Fredo doesn't really need to be doing wordplay and verbal gymnastics. His style is quite low-key and laid back, and his delivery is always matter-of-fact and low-key, which is what makes him an interesting artist. I also like the single BMT, Big Man Ting. This is a classic grime beat with some overemphasized keys and a scatty drum pattern. BMT's got a great chorus and great energy and just hypes you up when you listen to it. Third Avenue is a good debut album from Fredo. The majority of these tracks deal with coke rap, selling drugs, buying money off the profits, beating people up who mess around with you, the usual sort of stuff. And while these tracks are decent, the standout moments come from these more introspective moments where Fredo layers some emotional depth over the top of these narratives from the street. Unfortunately, there aren't enough of these moments on these 13 tracks. For every survival of the fittest, there's also songs like Moneymaker, where Fredo just goes to the cliches of just money, girls, and drugs. I also wasn't a big fan of the track I thought that humming chorus was quite annoying. The beat sounded like a knockoff version of God's Plan as well. But for a debut album, Third Avenue is very enjoyable. Fredo's got a really good delivery and a really captivating personality that he showcases all across the project. In future, I'd like to hear him talk more about these emotional subjects and how his early life in the streets has affected his psychology. The less enjoyable tracks were the more cliche ones, but that's not knocking from the project overall. I enjoyed it from Fredo, and I look forward to hearing what he comes up with next. So for me, Fredo, Third Avenue is worthy of 6 out of 10.